Well, welcome, Renuka Ramanujam. It's lovely to have you with me today. Thank you for giving up some time to um, be interrogated. Sorry, to be interviewed.
No, thank you so much, Ian, for having me on board. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Ah, fantastic. Well, we have met once before, and we've passed a few emails back and forth. So it's great to finally have a proper chat with you. I do these interviews partly because I find out more about people by interviewing them. I mean, for example, I interviewed a chap I've known since 1995 last Friday, and I learned more about him from the interview than I have done all the years that I've known him. So that's why I do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, conversation brings up, I'm sure, lots of random facts and ways that, when you're going about your daily life, you wouldn't have the chance to find out otherwise. So, it's fascinating, I'm
Exactly.
sure.
So anyway, for those of you that don't know you, by way of introduction, um, Renuka is the CEO and founder of a startup business called HUID. Is that how you pronounce it? HUID?
Howd, actually, it's a Dutch word,
Hode.
so it's another
Hode.
confusing thing there, but
Ah,
howd, yeah.
because you got some Dutch parentage, haven't you? Or you used to live in Holland.
Yeah, so I was born there and I spent a little bit of my childhood there and have also worked there and still have family, so there is a connection to the
Ah,
Netherlands.
okay. And you've got an American twang going on there. Is that from schooling, is it, in
I
Holland?
mean, no, not even, well, international school. I went to school in Singapore and I think we were even studying, British system schooling. So, and a lot of my teachers were British. So I really, really don't know. But you talk to a lot of people nowadays and they're sort of recognizing that international school accents have this sort of American twist. Not quite, but they kind of lean that way. So I guess I'm in that pool of people, really.
And you live in Scotland. You live in Oban, a
Yeah.
long way north. That's amazing. What
Yes,
a wonderful part of the world to live in.
for sure.
And famous for its whiskey and lots of other
Yeah.
things, I'm sure. But your background, I mean, you've got a fascinating background. So you were at the University of Arts in London.
Yeah.
You got a first class honours in textile design, the Bachelor of Arts. So very impressive.
You're
Well
reading out
done.
my CV
I
now.
well, I'm just going. Actually, this is on your LinkedIn. So,
Yeah.
and you're into volleyball and surf or
Yeah,
surfing?
yeah, surfing. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't get to do it that often, but I really enjoy it when I do. And even, in Scotland as well, there's some good surf, so that's been fun as
I
well.
didn't know that.
Yeah, there's an
Where?
island about 4 hours by ferry from where I am in Oban. It's called
Okay.
Tyree, and it's famous for surfing because it's a completely flat island. It's really windy because it's in the Outer Hebrides. So you go to any beach, there's always one beach that's got good waves going because of the wind.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a great time in the summer. You could be in the Caribbean, but you're in
What?
Scotland. So
Bit colder than the Caribbean,
it
right?
might be a little bit, but you can pretend.
My son's a very keen surfer, so he'll be
Oh,
interested
lovely.
to hear about that
Yeah.
because he's always looking for good places to surf.
Yeah, it's a little less frequent than maybe some of the other hotspots in Europe, so that's another reason to go. It's a little less crowded.
And do you have a surfboard?
I do not. I feel
Ah.
not yet. One
Would you like
day
one? Because we've got three, and I'm trying to offload them.
I would love that. Yes, if you can send it to Oban, that would be fantastic.
Uh, Fantastic. Well, look, I know you've during the conversation you'll talk about your business and your startup and what. So I've got a series of questions I'm going to ask you, but to sort of start off, before we get into the nitty gritty of how it all started, who inspires you out of interest?
Gosh, it's hard to put any one person down, but there's that saying of like you're shaped by the five people you spend the most time with, and I really think that's true. So I'm gonna go for a fairly safe and boring answer, I feel like, and just go with my family. So
Hmm.
I would say, and I think there's something to do with heritage and the way you're brought up that really influences you or shapes you.
It does.
So just to give some context, like my family, my grandfather moved to the Netherlands in the 60s to
Hmm.
work for Shell, a big oil company that we all know. Um,
Interesting.
and then, you know, uh, slowly the family on my dad's side anyway started settling over there, and we're no stranger to moving around. Like parents, my dad went to boarding school, my aunt went there too in the UK, so a very multicultural upbringing in that sense. There's a lot of understanding of like how growing up between spaces can affect how you interact with the world, and I think that's been really key. But I think with that sort of moving around and also being some like considered, an immigrant, there's that mentality of like, in order to make your mark, you have to work really hard. And there's a perseverance and resilience that's really been instilled. And the one thing that I think of, I don't know why, when I heard the question was, um, when I was in secondary school and I didn't make the basketball team or the first team or whatever it was, and I was really upset. And I came home and yeah, my dad was just saying to me like, if you really want to be on that team, go to the B team practice and prove to the coach why you deserve a spot on that A team. And that
Good advice.
mentality, yeah, that's been the sort of vibe that I've been receiving as a child. And as well, always stay the distance, apply yourself, and fight for the things that you really care about. But if I'm nailing one person down in particular, I would have to say my aunt.
Uh-huh.
She is amazing. She has overcome so many challenges and is just an example of someone who has resilience and is making the best of the world around her. She got into a car accident when she was quite young, about my age, so early 30s, and then was wheelchair bound after that. And
Right.
she's obviously still got, she's very mentally capable. It's just like she can't walk. That's the thing. And
Mm.
through her, I've seen the challenges she faces on a daily basis. People don't recognize what it's like to be in a wheelchair and all the challenges that come with that. But I've seen her navigate so many things. Like even though she was in a car accident, she now drives around in a car with adaptions. Like to overcome that
Cool.
fear is
Mm.
incredible. And she's running her own business and just yeah, so many things where I'm like, wow, like, it helps me have perspective, but at the same time, it gives me a sense of like it is possible, anything that you want to achieve. So it sounds a bit cheesy, but yeah, I would say
No, not at all.
yeah.
You can achieve anything you put your mind to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, that's fantastic. So come on then. How did it all start then? This startup business. Where did the idea come from, and why did you go through the pain of a startup
Yeah.
company?
You know that all too well, don't you?
Mm.
I mean, I think a lot of us don't know the pain of a startup, and if we did, we wouldn't do it. So I think we go in blind a lot of the time, and that's certainly how this came about. Like, I had no visions of being an entrepreneur or a CEO or whatever it is, or having my own thing. I really just like creating, and even materials in particular, I think. The concept of alchemy and chemistry as a subject always fascinated me. I remember as a kid, I was reading this book, a picture book called Morris's Disappearing Bag. It's a very old story, and that it's really irrelevant to the story, but it's about a family of rabbits on Christmas Day opening presents, and one of the sister rabbits, she gets a chemistry set for Christmas, and I remember being like, that looks so cool, and she was making potions, and that always amazed me, and I think even the ability to use natural materials, crafting, basketry, turn a raw material into something that has function, that is incredible. So that's always been on my mind. I studied textiles, as you so rightfully said, and while I was there, I was focused on printmaking, and I noticed a lot of the things that we were using inks wise and print paste wise, we had to be under fume cupboards. We were mixing our pastes, and when we were finished with the print paste, they'd be tipped into these ominous blue vats and taken away. Where? I don't know. And I just thought, we're interacting with this on a daily basis. Like, surely there must be a way to use materials that don't require such careful handling because they're safe. And so, upon doing some digging, I started developing a project where I was like, I want to make biodegradable screen printing inks instead of using the stuff that they're using in industry. And so, I found some recipes and started tweaking them and getting interested in, yeah, sort of the chemical makeup of dyes, and then sort of applied that thinking to other materials as well, and started saying, hey, if I understand the chemistry, I can create something new. And so that's where that sort of discovery started. And then I ended up working with mycelium, which, if you don't know, is a material made from the roots of mushrooms, so sort of fungus, if you will. And we were making insulation panels with mycelium.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing this in Amsterdam, and Amsterdam is not a warm country or city, sorry. We need to edit that out. Amsterdam is not a warm city. Um, and we were doing this in the dead of winter. And I just remember thinking, we're taking 2 weeks and lots of incubation time in a warm chamber to create this material. Surely there must be a better way. And it was actually my textile design background where I was dyeing fabric with onion skins because they give off tannins or a sort of very brown orange that
Mm.
sticks really well to fabric. And I thought after boiling them for 4 hours, they're still so robust. Surely we can do something with them after they're used for dyeing, like use the skins to create a material. And that's where it started, really. And I just started experimenting in my kitchen with glues and various things, really rudimentary, crude experiments. And then spoke to some of my friends who were biochemists, and they said, huh, maybe you should look into more of the characteristics of onion skins. Like, what's in them? What are the fibers? Like, what else do they contain? And I started trying to read scientific journals. If you're not in the sort of scientific field, they can be quite intimidating at first. And so, but you realize there's a structure and you learn. So after decoding that and speaking to more scientists, eventually, yeah, just kept experimenting, wrote some grants, and it got a bit out of control. And now we're here.
Wow, how exciting! And so, talk me through who else is involved. What's the business look like?
Yeah, so we work with, so up until last year, so this, to give some context, I started working on it around the middle of 2021. And towards the beginning of 2024. So there was some time where I was doing it on my own. I'll come back to that. But I had a team member join me, full-time team member, a biochemist, Marie, who's fantastic, and she's really helped to push things along. And then earlier this year in 2025, we brought on Phoebe, a material scientist. So we started to grow a little internal team. But from back in 2021, really, I've had external support through universities. The University of Strathclyde in Glasgow is one of our longest standing relationships, but along the way, we've had other universities, the University of Northumbria, and we're engaging with Robert Gordon. So mostly Scottish and Northern England universities. That
Okay.
being said, we also are on an accelerator program through Imperial College London called Undaunted, the Greenhouse, and that has given us the ability to sort of be put in touch with the network at Imperial and other sort of institutions within that ecosystem. So that's been really helpful because, as we all know, London is kind of an epicenter for startups and money, really. So that's
Mm.
always helpful. Yeah.
And what do you plan to do with these fibers, these onion skin waste fibers? What's your ambition?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to give some context on, yeah, what we're actually doing with onion skins, we are converting the onion skin itself into packaging materials. But really, what we're doing is we're developing the process to extract the good stuff or the fibers and other interesting compounds from the onion skins. And then hopefully we can give that process to manufacturers and pulpers who can then make it at scale because we're just a tiny startup and we want to help the industry. We don't want to beat it. We want to transition it to a better future. So that's our goal. But yeah, in terms of where we see this in the future, yeah, we really want to be able to have a system that's self-sustaining and holistic from the ground up. I think that's the thing. We're not just like tweaking one part of the system. We're trying to actually give an alternative cellulose source, which is really important. A lot of paper comes from trees. We all know that, but trees are not as renewable as I think they're being made out to be, really. And I think given how the population is growing, how packaging regulation is also moving, there's going to be a lot more demand for paper-based products. And the reality is that trees likely won't be able to fulfill all of that the way it's growing and for the fact that trees take a while to get to maturity, right? So I think we are essentially helping to step in and provide a very good resource that can help the transition to more sustainable packaging options.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and alternative fibers.
yeah.
I was reading in your bio that your primary objective is to find replacements for fossil-based plastic materials for not just packaging but other things. Is that
Yeah.
your main focus?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously when you watch the market and like what's going on, like you have to focus specifically on one thing at a time because when you're building a startup, as you know, you can't, you have this grand vision, but it's attacking things systematically one at a time to get to that bigger vision. But I think um yeah, fossil fuel based materials generally for single use applications at least, that's definitely the area that we're targeting. So
Yeah,
we have focused on packaging because it is prolific and it's something that affects everyone. But going back to sort of like the sort of more global perspectives, we can easily see that single-use plastic is disproportionately affecting countries in the East in terms of waste colonialism and this horrible habit we have in the West of exporting our waste over for other countries to deal with. I don't know. Yeah, it seems quite backward, but it's still happening. And they're pushing back those countries slowly, which is great, but it means we need to find better solutions. So really, we're doing this to help everybody and reduce the pressure on everyone.
those listening will probably think onion skins, don't they smell a bit? And therefore, when they're converted, will the final product stink of onions? Can you reassure people that that's not the case?
I love that because the first thing anybody does when they pick up some of our samples is just give them a sniff. And I think, I mean, that's the proof is in the pudding, and no one has, or rather, everyone has said, you know, I'm so surprised these don't smell. And they don't because they go through processing just like any other fiber does. You know, you think of your paper, your copier paper, that was wood. Wood does have a scent, albeit not as pungent as onion, but it doesn't smell like that when it's made into the product. So it's the same with our fiber as well.
Yeah. And do you see it being mixed with other fibers, or can it stand alone as a single fiber?
Well, I
Or...
mean, you've received some samples, Ian. I think you can
Yes,
you
I
can
have. They're somewhere here.
I mean, some of them you've received some that are a blend, which we see work really well. So,
Yeah,
you know, we've tried things like hemp, flax, recycled fibers, and we know that the onion skins, yeah, there they are.
they look
Um,
great, don't they? There you go.
Yeah, the onion skin itself, it can stand up, but it does have limitations. So it is a thing of like it's there to sort of help ease the burden, and it does have benefits. Like it is a lighter fiber than I guess your
That's
standard
interesting.
wood fiber because yeah, as you say, it is interesting because of, you know, packaging regulation. A lot of packaging is taxed on weight. So if we have a lighter weight fiber, you can easily start seeing how that can become a benefit in terms of reducing costs. So that is quite exciting.
Yeah, and help perhaps fill in the peaks and troughs in the surface of wood pulp fiber.
Yeah, for
Very
sure.
interesting. Okay, so my next question is along the way, you've probably made one or two mistakes that you probably wouldn't want to admit to. But anyway, um, of those from those mistakes that you've made, what have you learned? What are those mistakes to start with, and what have you learned?
Yeah, they're kind of broad stroke mistakes, like things that I think, you know, I'm from my background, like, you know, I was freelancing, so I was my own boss, and it becomes very different when you have to lead other people or you have to manage a team or work not just by yourself. I think so. The big thing, especially with a startup, is at the beginning it is just you because you're trying to graft to get this off the ground. So you have to work on all fronts. But then there's a mistake of believing that you have to do everything and that you have to be good at everything. And I think
Hmm.
that's one thing I would go back and just be like, no, it's bigger than you. You want the end goal is bigger than any one person. So get out there and get people who are better than you to do the job instead of thinking you need to learn everything. It goes so much faster. And it's also just a nice way to have the journey, like it not being alone all the time. I think the other thing is this is something that I'm still learning to do, is lacking boundaries. I think when you're building something that you really believe in, it's so easy to just work on it all the time and make it everything at the end all and be all. And the reality is you burn out. And I think we all know this. Startup founders are, it's so common amongst them, and it's well known. So I think it's firstly just sort of understanding how valuable you are to the business, and that it does kind of start and end with you, but that in order for that to happen, you need to rest, and you need to also understand that it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I think it's one thing I would say is pace yourself. And I was always used to be so panicky. If I don't get this thing done today, the only person that was putting that pressure on me was myself.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
just understanding, I think I've had mentors who are a bit older than me who've, always been able to say, if you don't get it done today and you get it done on Monday instead, the sun will still go up and it'll still come down and everything will still be okay. And I would hear their words, but for whatever reason, I just wouldn't be able to internalize it. And I think it just does come with having to go through it and maybe burning out a little bit to come back and be like, okay, I'm going to put those boundaries in
Sure.
place.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and the last thing I would say, this is more of a compared to those two, is just very much a project management thing. I think this came from the fact that I don't have a scientific background, and I was then having to engage with university partners who were, scientists, and I was having to lead them on our R&D, and I didn't speak the language, so I had to just do the best that I could in terms of like deliverables and outcomes and all this project management lingo, which I couldn't sort of correspond to the sort of R&D that they were doing for me. And in that instance, yeah, I was just inexperienced. I think I wish I had spoken to, instead of trying to, again, figure it out myself, that I'd brought in a biochemist or something earlier just to consult and be like, okay, this is what you might want to expect for the project. Someone on my side rather than the university who might have their own, not their own agenda, but they're trying to fit it in amongst all the other projects they're doing.
Yes.
So it's really
Yes.
vouching for what you need to get from them and having someone who's strong enough to push back. As soon as Marie came on board, she was able to say, no, I don't think that technique you're suggesting is right for what we need. Whereas I wouldn't have known the difference. So I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
having someone on your side, technical expertise can, even though it's a cost for consulting, it can save a lot of time down the line. Yeah.
Indeed. So if you could have a chat with your younger self, what would you say to you?
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, kind of going back to the mistakes, it's kind of a reflection of those, right? So I think there's a lot of this goes back to context in terms of like where I grew up and the school I went to, and the also the sort of maybe the flip side of, I was talking about that resilience and keep going attitude of like it must be perfect, or the school I went to, a lot of it was very academically rigorous, and it was the kind of place that kids went to Ivy Leagues or Oxbridge, and that was kind of the marker for success. Me going to art school was very left field. So I think just having that reassurance that it's really brave to step out and do something, and but your value does not depend on the success of this endeavor. You're good enough just for taking the leap and trying something, and that's amazing. And that it's okay to fail. It's okay if it doesn't go how you think it will, but you've
Mhm.
learned so much, and thinking about the journey instead of having to hit certain targets all the time, I think is very generic, but it's just something I wish I had the sort of capacity to tell myself earlier on in the journey of like, look how well you're doing even by taking this step. But also not to forget your relationships as well along the way. They're the key relationships with people, but with your environment, with nature, with the sun, with all the beautiful things around you. They're the things that are going to keep you grounded. It can be so easy, again, with that definition of success, to just focus on work and just go hard on that and be like, those other things will be around later if I just accomplish this now. But that's not true. And what's the point? I think in one of our chats, we were saying, like life is for enjoyment. You've got to have fun, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing I would say.
All about a balance, isn't it? So
Yes.
what's your dream for the future? What do you hope to achieve with the business, but also beyond that?
Work-life balance is one.
Yeah.
That's a big dream. But I think seeing sort of like systemic change. So, so for someone at home who's, chopping their onion skins, they see our product and they see what it's been able to do, and they're now thinking about how they can use waste products in their homes every day in a different method or way than they originally would have envisioned. And I would like to believe that our system, our HUID ecosystem rather, is operating self-sufficiently and able to provide um, sort of an income stream for those onion farmers and agricultural producers. We're looking to work with farms around the world. So in some of these
Mm.
situations, it's an opportunity for marginalized communities to really um, have some social mobility, which is really, really exciting. So I think, yeah, seeing our product, our process, and all of our stakeholders succeeding um, in different ways around the world would be really
So,
valuable.
what are they doing with the onion skins, waste onion skins at the moment? Where are they going?
So it depends which farm you talk to and where in the world they are, because obviously disposal regulation plays a big part in this. So in the UK, for example, you've got some farms that have anaerobic digesters on site, or they just have a big compost heap and they're just going there. Others have to pay a waste disposal company in order to do that for them, just because they don't have the space to do that. But then you talk to farms in other places where, again, it's not so strict, and they're just saying we bag it up and throw it in landfill. So yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty bad if you think about it in terms of like methane. And that's one of our things is like, if we can divert methane on top of, being another source of cellulose, there's so many benefits that could come from this, really. Yeah.
Has anybody ever made textile products or packaging from onion skins before?
No, that's something that we've checked quite in depth, because we're in the process of filing a patent just now. And yeah, we've seen that there's been some investigation into onion skins. It's starting now for materials, but no one's really done anything with it in a packaging context, and more for nutrition, because apart from the fibers, there's other sort of um compounds that are interesting for nutraceuticals and maybe even pharmaceuticals or cosmetics. So
Mm.
that's been more of the focus, but no one's really pursued it commercially until now.
But tell us something extraordinary about you.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I wrote I will I oh, okay. What
This is the
sort of
big reveal. This is the big
extraordinary
reveal. Come on, be
No, no,
brave.
no, 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 no. What is define what sort of extraordinary? Like what am I supposed to be
Tell us
I need
something
an
that you that
example.
that in the business world people probably don't know about you
Oh
that you
yeah.
might want them to know.
Oh, I don't know if I'd want them. It's more a fun fact about me more than anything.
Go on, then go for a
I've got a
fun fact.
couple. I've got three. Okay. You can choose which one you like the most, and then edit the rest out. So, I didn't get it, but I was almost a body double for Simone Ashley. If you've watched Bridgerton,
Oh
uh,
yeah,
um,
yes. Really?
yeah, in The Little Mermaid, not for Bridgerton, but she plays one of Ariel's sister in the more recent reboot of The Little Mermaid. And it was a fun audition. I had to get into a pool in the studio and sort of pretend to be a graceful mermaid. So that was that was interesting. But yeah, no, it was fun, like sort of putting our pictures together and being like, oh, we actually do look quite similar. So
Mm.
that's one. I went to a tall ship trip in Australia when I was at school. So we got to sail around the coast of, I think it was Fremantle, or near Fremantle, and I must have been about 13, 14 at the time. And everyone proceeded to get sick on the boat except for me. So I won the
Right.
Stomach of Steel award for that.
Stomach of steel. Wow, what an
So
award.
I don't know if that translates to my founder life in terms of being able to, steel up against some pretty, uncomfortable situations, but maybe, who knows?
Wow.
And yeah, the last one is a little less interesting, was that I actually climbed the mast of a tall ship. How many people can say that? And sat on the
Wow.
top of that. And
Yeah.
it was a fun thing where, we were all given the option to do it, but then we had, on one condition, there was a little plaque with a quote engraved on the top of the mast, and the rule was that you couldn't tell anybody else what it said. They had to go up and see it for
What does it
themselves.
say? Stop.
No, I feel like I'm in a safe space now, so I can share. It said it was quite beautiful and you know, also very true. Is every end is a new beginning.
Nice. I like
So
that. Very good.
yeah.
So come on then. Of all the books and movies you've watched over the years, which one would you pick out as the one that's had the biggest impact on you?
Can I have two?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so I would say one definitely that has impacted me massively is Into the Wild, the movie in particular. I think
Okay.
it is a true story, or it's based on a true story of a young man who is sort of really discontent with the state of society and sort of goes into being I don't want to say a tramp, but like a sort of a lone wolf in the woods. And he sort of says, I don't need anybody. I'm gonna sort of rough it on my own and live off the land. And he was sort of really underprepared for this whole thing. And sadly, he perishes at the end of the film. Again, it is a true story, so this is really what happened to the name of the guy is Christopher McCandless. But I found it really moving, his story, because he really believed in pursuing a life in nature and something different from the rat race and the grind. And it was the first time I really sort of I've been brought up in a school where they were like, do social service, like think about humanitarian work, but it was like all within our current system. And this was the first time I'd really thought, oh, there's a different way you can live your life off the grid living, all that. And that was fascinating for me. And what he said at the end of the story was that happiness is only real when shared. That was his last reflection before he died. And I think that also, again, sort of relates to what we were saying before about your relationships being really important. Like you can create this amazing life, but if you're living it by yourself, like how you miss out on a lot of the potential joy you could be having. So I think it was a tale of resilience, but also just a really beautiful narrative. Um,
Into the Wild. Right. Okay. I shall
yeah.
add that to my list of movies to watch.
Yeah. I didn't speak
Um,
to anybody for 3 days after watching that. I was so moved by that. I don't know
wow.
why. I just was so affected by it. But anyway, and then the second one is a book, and it was my grandfather's favorite book, and it was my aunt's favorite book, and it's also one of mine. And it's The Count of Monte Cristo. I don't know if you've read that
I've not
one
read
before.
that. No, I've heard of it.
It's fantastic. I would highly recommend reading the unabridged version. It's long, but it's totally worth it. And it's a plot with so many intricacies, and you're just amazed at how someone could come up with all of that. It's incredible. And it tells the story of a young man, Edmond Dantes, who has been falsely accused of a crime he did not commit because of jealousy and other reasons. But this is during the time of Napoleon Bonaparte, and so it's in that political backdrop. It's interesting, but it's about how he essentially his life is taken away from him. But through a series of events and the relationships he builds, he's able to come back and exact revenge in a very intelligent but sort of prolonged. It's incredible the way he does it. But again, he at the end of the day he comes to realize, like, I'm so driven by this one goal for revenge, I'm missing out on the beauty of other things, of happiness, of love, because I'm so driven by this negative emotion. So it's quite a powerful tale. I'd really
Sounds
recommend it.
great. Oh,
Yeah.
I look forward to reading that. Well, look, Renuka, thank you so much for sharing your stories and your insights. You are an inspiring individual,
Oh, thank
and I
you.
think, well, you are, and I think people will enjoy listening to this. But thank you so much.